The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Hey, remember that whole week after week after week scandal where Republicans were saying, we can't just pass a simple bill on increasing the debt limit without including all sorts of other nonsense in it? I guess they actually could, because the House of Representatives has approved an increase in the national debt limit yesterday, setting up passage of a bill in the Senate that would allow the nation to continue paying its bills this year. This would boost the current debt ceiling of $17 trillion before the government would have to be defaulting, essentially. At the end of the month, it passed 221 to 201, with 28 Republicans joining 193 Democrats in voting yes. The Republicans in the Senate haven't yet committed to letting this pass, but every indication from Republican insiders is that it will pass. I have so many thoughts on this. Number one, we can have a conversation about the policy of increasing the debt limit or not from an economic standpoint. However, to argue that this is a democratic policy that Republicans don't partake in, or that it is partisan in some way, is ridiculous. Every president has increased the debt limit many, many times over the last 30 years. And in fact, President Obama has done less increasing of the debt limit than many other presidents. The question is, though, why is it all of a sudden that Republicans are allowing this to happen? Any thoughts, Lewis?
I don't know, because I can't say that it would be political posturing, would it?
No, I wouldn't say that it's political posturing, but you know what I think it is? That Republicans have realized this really hurt us in the polls, right? When you look at the reaction from, I'm trying to think, who was it that kept saying, this had no effect? No, this had no effect at all. I think it was Ted Cruz. It was clear that the whole government shutdown debacle really hurt Republicans. And they're saying, you know what? Rather than bringing on all that negative attention again on ourselves because of shutting down the government over increasing the debt limit, let's let this quietly slide by. Nobody talk about it very much, and let's try to keep the focus on the Obamacare website or back to Benghazi or something. I think it's a completely pragmatic and logical move from Republicans, realizing it really hurt them when they shut down the government over this.
So, possible political posturing. I mean, we are getting closer to some elections, right?
Yeah, no, the 2014 election is coming up. I guess I was thinking of political posturing in a slightly different way. So what have we learned, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, it is actually very possible, simple, and easy for Republicans to let the debt ceiling go up without having to shut down government or do all that other stuff. There was nothing necessary about the government shutdown. That's really what should be angering us, which is that the entire line we were fed from Republicans when the government was shut down about how there was simply no choice, it had to be this way, it was obviously a lie, because as we see, it didn't have to be that way. South Carolina is really in trouble. I feel bad for South Carolina. Not only are they ranked 43rd in healthcare outcomes, their education system is completely falling apart. And they have now decided to remove evolution from the teaching standards. Keith sent me this story. It's about an education committee in South Carolina that approved new science standards for students, except for one thing, the one that involves use of the phrase natural selection. The South Carolina Education Oversight Committee met 2 days ago to review and approve this new set of science standards that would be taught by the Department of Education. It would start in the fall of this year. Senator Mike Fair, he's a Republican from Greenville. I know I didn't have to tell you that. He argued against teaching natural selection as fact when he believes there are other theories students should learn. So what he said after the meeting is, natural selection is a direct reference to Darwinism, and the implication of Darwinism is that it is start to finish. Going on to say, to teach that natural selection is the answer to origins is wrong. I don't have a problem with teaching theories. I don't think it should be taught as fact. I almost threw my computer monitor out the window when I read this. How are you on an education committee and you don't even understand that there is a scientific definition of theory, and then there is your colloquial definition of theory, that they are not the same thing. His definition is not the one that we should be using when figuring out science curriculum. If we're teaching science, let's use the scientific definition of theory rather than his, which is, well, theory means it's just an idea, and it's equally valid or invalid as any other idea that anybody might have, like a man in the sky created everything.
Even if we did use his definition of what a theory is, something like 98% of the scientific community would still agree with that theory. So I think it's kind of stupid to say that it is less important or less prominent than other theories.
He talked about trying to teach the controversy, and College of Charleston biology professor Robert Dillon said, they're trying to make evolution appear controversial. They're trying to make it somewhat different. Well, it is controversial, but the controversy is political or religious. There is no scientific controversy. Again, drawing the contrast between the scientific and cultural definition of theory, we now need to look at the scientific and cultural definition of controversy as well. South Carolina is really in trouble.
South Carolina, it's just one hit after another. I feel really bad for the people who live there. They really need to start using the internets and learning about the people they're electing.
Curtis sent me a story from Idaho about a bill that would allow discrimination based on religious beliefs. If you are an employee somewhere, you would be allowed to discriminate against someone if what they are asking you to do or what your job would entail would violate your sincerely held religious beliefs. And then Casey sent me another story pointing out that in Kansas, a bill is working its way through the legislature which would allow discrimination based on religious beliefs. So we said, let's combine them into one story. Now in Idaho, we're looking at House Bills 426 and 427. Both of them would allow people in Idaho to refuse to do business with those that they object to for religious reasons. Now, if it passes, the bill could conflict with the city's recently adopted anti-bias ordinance. Supposedly, right, on paper, the bill's goal is to protect the devout believers from having to perform services or do business with people they object with for religious reasons. In reality, it essentially is a license to discriminate. And two of the terms we have to look at are religion and sincerely held religious beliefs, which is one of the funniest statements I've heard maybe in my life when it comes to discussions of religion. I have a feeling that if you sincerely believe that because of an invisible gazelle that flies around the universe, you can't do business with members of the military, you just won't sell your product to members of the military, you're not going to get very far with Idaho courts. However, if you believe that because of a Jewish carpenter in the sky who was killed and then reborn after being initially born to a virgin, you can't do business with gay people, that would be a different story. And this term of what is a sincerely held religious belief is a term that should not be in any bill that allows discrimination.
Yeah, and something tells me that the first time an incident pops up where a Muslim refuses to do business with someone because of their religious beliefs, they're screwed. This just won't apply for some.
Muslims aren't going to do business with Christians because they've said that the New Testament now says it's okay to eat pork, and Muslims are very offended by that, and they're just not going to do business. No, Fox News won't be all over that, saying war on Christmas, war on Christians. Now, fortunately, the Attorney General has already said the law is probably unconstitutional. It's really not going to go very far. It's an actual violation of the First Amendment, not like when Phil Robertson was suspended from Duck Dynasty by A&E for saying offensive stuff. That had nothing to do with the First Amendment. This actually is an issue of First Amendment if you are legalizing discrimination against protected classes. The other story is the one in Kansas. It's very similar. It would allow discrimination based on religious beliefs. It's going to go even further than past legislation specifically related just to refusing same-sex marriage-related services, because it actually extends to private businesses too. So private businesses in Kansas, if this passes, would be able to discriminate based on religious beliefs. And once you say, hey, just if you sincerely hold the religious belief, you can refuse service, you're undoing so much of the work of just basic civil rights legislation.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone cares about that when it comes to Christianity, which is this is really all about.
This is a disaster. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're just afraid of the direction this country is going in. And these are very desperate and pathetic moves.
These are desperate attempts to counteract the move towards equality and the liberalization on social issues of this country, which is a good thing. It's a disaster. It's pathetic. It's embarrassing for these states. And in 20 years, these attempts are going to be seen in the same way as those who wanted to keep black people out of their stores and restaurants when there was integration. It will be seen the same way at most in 20 years and probably sooner. After so many requests for a David Pakman Show message board or forum or way to kind of suggest stories and talk with other David Pakman Show viewers, Derek has helped us create a David Pakman Show subreddit. If you're a Reddit user, you already know what a subreddit is. If you aren't a Reddit user, you should definitely check it out. Reddit is an awesome website, and we've created our own subreddit. How do you find this? It's very easy. Go to reddit.com, that's reddit.com/r/The David Pakman Show. The Eggman, I woke up this morning. The thing was created last night by Derek. I woke up this morning. The Eggman already had a rant about my views on hate crimes on the David Pakman Show subreddit. I already responded to him. Lewis is going to get on the subreddit later today. So this is actually very cool, Lewis. It's a way for people to suggest stories. We can post videos. The audience can make suggestions. Maybe there will be Reddit-only membership specials in the future. Who knows? I think it's very cool.
It's a big effing deal, David. I'm really excited about this. And I love that people will have a chance to yell at each other instead of doing it over voicemails and emails now.
And instead of just yelling at us, they can argue with each other as well. So go to reddit.com/r/The David Pakman Show. Hopefully by today or tomorrow, we'll set up a little link to it from our website, or maybe even set up a redirect so that if you just go to like davidpakman.com/Reddit, it will automatically take you to it. Let's see if we can get that going. We'll take a break. I want to give you the latest on the Indiegogo campaign. I have more homoerotic Patriot mail for you and so much more. We have an excellent interview for you today. Stay with us, davidpakman.com/membership to become a David Pakman Show supporter.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our membership program is brought to you in part by liberalbias.com. In a free society, everybody could vote on which theories to believe. When elite scientists rely on so-called facts, it just shows they have a liberal bias. Find out more at liberalbias.com. Hello to our member of the day, Rano Banerjee. Rano Banerjee, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join at davidpakman.com/membership. You can also support our show for free with the Amazon shopping you already do. Go to our website, davidpakman.com, click on and bookmark the Amazon banner, and then use the link whenever you shop. Amazon sends us 7% of your purchase. Doesn't cost you 1 penny extra. Let's do an update on the Indiegogo campaign. The Indiegogo campaign has accelerated significantly over the last few days. We had 200 individual funders contribute so far. We had some very big contributions of $1,000, $1,500, $2,500, and $3,500 come in. And this really could be a reality. If you've been waiting to see the viability of the campaign before contributing, please wait no more. We are closing in. I think now we're only 11 or 12 days away from the end of the campaign. The idea is to expand our show to 5 days a week. This involves significant extra costs in the short and medium term, including staff hours, upgrading the video production setup in our studio, as well as bandwidth costs and some other expenses. We need your help to do it. If you like our show, if you've been watching the show, listening to the show for a while, and you like it at 4 days a week, then why not help us grow to 5 days a week? You will get one extra show. If you're someone who likes to listen on the weekends, you'll have an actual Friday show that you can listen to on Saturday or Sunday. People are excited. Over 200 contributors. Our friends at the Young Turks are helping us promote the campaign. Our friend Jay Tomlinson over at Best of the Left podcast is getting involved. Whatever you can do, even if it's just leaving a comment or leaving a $1 or $2 contribution, really does help. So go to davidpakman.com, click on the blue Indiegogo banner at the top of the page. It is Wednesday and it is Hatriot Mail, and we have a brand new Second Amendment themed Hatriot Mail introduction. Listen to this one.
The right of the people to keep and bear hate shall not be infringed. Patriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
I love that. There's something about that one that is just excellent. Today's Hatriot Mail, not surprisingly, it's becoming like almost an every other week thing, is very hateful, but at the same time, it once again has homoerotic undertones. Listen to this. See what you make of it.
Seriously, hire an economist. Varys is your boyfriend. All raising the minimum wage does is make the poor, middle-income people poorer and provide less desire for unemployed people to work. Love how your show provides one-sided input. Hitler did that. Jews found it works in America.
Wow, so we actually have two Hatriot Mail staples in this Hatriot Mail. Number one, the implications that I or Lewis are gay and maybe even in a relationship together. So referencing Lewis as my boyfriend. This is not that unique of a thing. I've had people who actually think it's really great that I produced this show with my boyfriend, Lewis. Of course, they were very shocked to find out that not only are Lewis and I not currently dating, neither one of us dates men, which was a shock to some people apparently. But it also goes back to Jewish Nazis. Again, referencing something Nazis and Hitler did, and then saying Jews have become that. So it is anti-Semitic, homophobic, and also straight up ignorant all in one. I'm amazed sometimes at the literary value of these Hatriot Mails. Put aside for a second the absolutely abhorrent grammar and spelling. If you can ignore that just temporarily, fitting this much hate and vitriol and insanity into 20 or 30 seconds is actually a skill to be commended in a certain way. It's pithiness to the extreme.
It is an accomplishment. It's incredible how condensed this is, yet how telling and revealing it also is. It really is. A lot of these Hatriot Mails really are just coming to us from literary geniuses.
I also have to, they're literary geniuses in one way, but at the same time, they're just so advanced that the spelling and grammar is left on the side of the road because they're too focused on the message.
Could be, or perhaps in 50 to 100 years, this will be the way everyone speaks.
The other really funny thing, imagine that, Lewis. Now that's something to be scared of. The other thing is that so many people are doing obviously fake hate letters, trying to get them into Hatriot Mail. And we have a system, which I don't want to go too into because I don't want to expose our methods, but so many people are putting stuff together to just see if they can get it in Hatriot Mail. I don't think we've run a single fake Hatriot Mail so far. I'm pretty confident of that.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it. I can't say with certitude that that's the case, but I'm confident.
You know that great Subway bread smell when you walk by a Subway sandwich shop and you're filled with the smells of the yeast and the rising dough and the fresh baked bread? You know that smell I'm talking about, Lewis. It's not a very mistakable smell.
No, as soon as you walk in or even walk by a Subway, it's very obvious.
It turns out that that smell is due, at least in part, to a dough conditioner called azodicarbonamide. This is an ingredient that is also found in yoga mats and shoe soles to add elasticity. I'm not talking about economic elasticity. I'm talking about just it being stretchy. The company says, Subway says, after a lot of complaints, they're going to get rid of azodicarbonamide. And they said, we're already in the process of removing it from part of our bread improvement efforts, despite the fact that it is USDA and an FDA approved ingredient. The complete conversion to have this product out of the bread will be done soon. The chemical is used by bakers for strengthening the dough, but it hasn't really been tested that well, according to the Center for Science in the Public Interest. One of the breakdown products that's derived from the original substance is called urethane, which is a recognized cancer-causing agent, according to the organization. And using azodicarbonamide at maximum allowable levels results in higher levels of urethane in bread that do pose a small risk to humans. I got a bunch of emails after we did the last story about, I think it was chicken nuggets having an ingredient that's also in silly putty. And people said, David, this doesn't make sense. The dosage signifies the poison, and there's such small amounts, and these things are generally safe, etc. If people take a moment to just sit back and look at some of the ingredients in the food they eat, does it really make sense to say, well, I don't care if there's stuff from silly putty in my food because the FDA says it's okay? Do you really want your food to have the same stuff in it that's in silly putty, or that breaks down to urethane? Is that really what you want, putting aside whether you will definitely get cancer from it?
It's not what I want. And also, we should mention that when people are talking about a safe dosage here, they're talking about one dose. They're talking about one Subway sandwich. They're talking about one order of chicken nuggets. And they're not talking about eating it every day or being exposed to lots of different products that might have the same ingredient on a daily basis.
This isn't about being alarmist. This is simply pointing out that why don't we opt for the products that don't have this? I'll give you a really good example. The other day, I bought a hummus container from a local place in Brooklyn that has awesome hummus, okay? And I went in my fridge, and when I was going to put it away, I noticed that the hummus container that was already in there, it was like a national brand, still all natural, of course, was empty. So I went to throw it out, and then I said, hold on a second. I'm just going to look at the ingredients on these two and just see, does the local hummus have the same ingredients as this national brand, which claims to be all natural? Well, the one that is from Brooklyn has the following ingredients: chickpeas, garlic, salt, lemon, tahini sauce. 5 ingredients. I know exactly what all of those are. The national brand, which is of course a natural product, which means nothing by the way, has chickpeas, tahini sauce, soybean oil, garlic, salt, citric acid, and potassium sorbate. Now let's go through it. I know citric acid is just an emulsifier added to foods. I know that potassium sorbate is considered non-toxic, and it is generally safe in relatively small quantities. But there are limits as to how much you should have, and there are potential side effects. How can anyone argue that given the choice, you would opt for the hummus that has the citric acid and potassium sorbate instead of the one that doesn't? Who really would make that choice?
Only someone who prefers the taste of the national brand so much over the other one that they don't care about the ingredients. And a lot of people do that with food. And of course, I would choose the former.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, if my comments aren't resonating with you, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me why we shouldn't care that there's azodicarbonamide in Subway bread if you eat Subway, when you could also not have it, and clearly Subway's business will continue. People will still buy the bread and buy the sandwiches even without the dough conditioner. Tell me where I'm going wrong. Next, Matt Dillahunty will be on.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Matt Dillahunty. He is host of the Atheist Experience. He's regularly engaging in formal debates, travels the U.S. speaking to local secular organizations and university groups as part of the Secular Student Alliance's Speakers Bureau. A bunch of our audience actually suggested that we have Matt on. And interestingly enough, Matt, a lot of those recommendations were after I had a conversation with a pastor named Carl Gallups. And I had asked Carl to give me some kind of evidence or reason why he believes the Bible is the Word of God that comes from outside the Bible itself. And we basically got to the point where he was, number one, talking about Deuteronomy as evidence from outside the Bible that the Bible is the Word of God. But then he also said that the fact that things that the Bible predicts have happened would be evidence that the Bible is a Word of God. To most of my audience, that's an argument that didn't make sense. I'm curious how you tackle those arguments in the debates that you do.
I think I would have done, very much the same thing you did. I keep asking for evidence from outside the Bible so that we're not in this position of constantly trying to verify, because the Bible's just claims. It can't also be the evidence for the claims. So I think I'd taken a similar task or tact on that, but it's strange that this is what keeps coming up. I did a debate last Friday with Ray Comfort, although I wouldn't call it a debate, where he just said flatly he had no interest in demonstrating God existed. We already know, we're just lying about it, and he believes the Bible, and that's all there is to it. So it's a very difficult subject to get through because they're beginning with a very different starting point than we are about how you determine what's reasonable to believe.
When you were thinking of being a Baptist minister for some time, was there a specific moment you remember where you said, not only am I not sure I want to be a Baptist minister, I don't think I believe in Christianity anymore?
Yeah, I can't pinpoint a single moment or a single event or even a single argument. I was basically studying with the goal of eventually convincing my atheist roommate, although we had no conversations about this. And this was a fairly long period of study. I was between jobs, as I am today. And over about 18 months or so, it was, let me be the best defender of Christianity I can be. Let me fulfill my obligation under 1 Peter 3:15 to give the reason for the faith that's within me. And at some point, and I don't remember exactly when or why, it was just like the wealth of information just kind of forced my belief to collapse to where I said, I don't know what I believe. I don't know if I believe in a God, but I definitely don't believe what I used to believe. So let me investigate further. Let me see if there's some other God or some other God concept within Christianity or outside of it that could be true or that I think is more reasonable. And that led to kind of a deeper study of philosophy and logic and skepticism to determine, how to direct that search.
So when that happened, was your initial feeling one of disappointment or being kind of was it a negative emotional state, or was it in a way positive and liberating? Because I could see it going either way.
Yeah, and I have seen it go either way. I get tons of email from people who are, elated as I was. By the time I finally realized that I should identify as an atheist, it was incredibly liberating. It was, it's not so much, I didn't dwell on the fact that I had believed something that I now thought was incorrect for so many years. I embraced the fact that now I've been corrected. It's kind of the foundation of science and similar thinking that you want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And so when you're corrected, that's a wonderful thing because now you've got reality. But I've heard from so many people who were just despondent, and quite many of them were upset over this idea that they had lost an eternal life. And that always struck me as strange because I couldn't see how you could lose something that you never had.
That's interesting. And this idea of being open to the changing of beliefs kind of came up in this debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham from the Creationism Museum. I have a couple of specific questions about the debate for you, but what were your thoughts about the debate happening in general? It was very interesting to me, but my concern was that in some way it was legitimizing the views of Ken Ham as worthy of being debated in this very kind of elaborate way with a scientist, and that in and of itself was a concern.
Yeah, that's a common objection that people like Richard Dawkins and others have. It's the reason why Richard doesn't debate creationists. I wasn't so much concerned for that reason. I was opposed to it in general because my understanding is that the Creation Museum was in financial trouble. And to me, this was Bill Nye taking the opportunity to make sure that they got a bunch of money. Because no matter how this debate turned out, Ken Ham is going to make money off this. If he would have done well and won, which I don't think is the case, or even portrayed it really well, that's a marketing tool. And if he fails, as evidently even Christian website polls showed that 92% thought Bill Nye won, that still becomes a marketing tool for him, because he can say, look, we've got to do more. We need more money to debate this and bring more information, and we've got to do a better job. All of this just kind of funds the Creation Museum. Now, overall, I thought Bill did a good job. I mean, there were mistakes, but Ken Ham was, I'm sorry to say, such a poor debater that he just kind of missed them.
One of the most interesting things specifically from the debate was this moment where they were each asked what might change their minds. And Ken Ham essentially said nothing, that it doesn't matter what anybody could tell him or show him. He's going to believe the Bible as the literal word of God, whereas Bill Nye said, well, evidence would change my mind. And when people talk to me about this, I say, I have no personal interest in there not being a God. I have no personal interest in making those who believe that feel bad or proving them wrong. I have an interest in just believing what I think is the truth based on evidence that has been presented to me. I'm 100% open to the idea that there is a higher power of some kind. It could be a God. It could be a more advanced civilization that has created the universe as a simulation, as I've talked to astrophysicist Lawrence Krauss about. Do you find that most non-believers are in the camp of being open to there being a God, or they're in the camp of knowing there is no God?
It's really hard to say because I primarily, run in circles of skeptics. And of those atheists that are skeptics and that are atheists because of skeptical reasons, I think that they're all open. Hey, give us the evidence. Show us, we'd like to believe as many true things, as few false things as possible. We're not beginning with this, we don't want to believe in a God thing. There are plenty of atheists out there who just flatly assert, no, there's no such thing as a God, and I have no interest in, that even possibly being true. And there are others who say things similar that are often misrepresented. Hitchens had famously said that, this idea of the Christian God in particular, he wouldn't even want it to be true. And what he meant, I definitely agree with. He was talking about the character of this individual and the model that they've created in the universe we're in. But if there is a God, I'd certainly like to know about it. And I'm not in any way proposing that it's necessarily impossible, that there's nothing that qualifies in that realm. It's just that I haven't seen the evidence for it.
One of the things that kind of bothers me sometimes when I hear from people about kind of questioning my beliefs is the idea that what if I'm wrong type of thing. And again, it's not one of these things where I'm on any kind of crusade. I was raised Jewish, relatively secular. I had a couple years of Hebrew school. It was never understood within my family that what I'm being taught is literally true, but the idea was there's kind of interesting cultural stuff here about Jews as a people that we kind of want you to grow up in. And it was never adversarial for me in any way. And I find that that's sometimes something that comes up very often, talking to those who are very religious, that it seems it has always been an adversarial thing for them. This, does God exist or does God not exist? Where for me it was, hey, I'm open to it either way.
Yeah, it's not, I don't really, I'd love to find out whether or not this is actually true, the various claims that a God exists. I find that, coming from your background of primarily cultural Judaism, the conflict is not as prevalent there, in part because you have to do so much work to become a Jew if you weren't born one, and the Reform Judaism doesn't even require that one actually believe in a God. But coming from my background, there certainly is a lot more adversarial to this. But I'm most definitely an evangelical atheist or a preaching atheist, and actually I'm probably preaching on behalf of skepticism. But unlike some skeptics who would say that they don't care what people believe, they care about the methods that they use to reach those beliefs, I actually also care about what people believe, because what people believe informs their actions, and their actions have consequences for themselves and others. So I care that somebody, believes that their God has ordained, for example, marriage as being one man, one woman forever.
The effects of that are very real for people.
Yeah, it's the actions they take on behalf of the beliefs, and it seems to me kind of counterproductive to say, I don't care about your beliefs, I only care about your actions. If you really care about the actions, you work to educate people so that their beliefs change.
We've been speaking with Matt Dillahunty. He is host of The Atheist Experience. Check that out. Matt, great to have you on, and I'm sure we had plenty of time for more, and we'll definitely have you back.
Thanks very much, David. I appreciate it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Yesterday morning, the lawyer for Michael Dunn started the first full day of his defense in the murder trial of his fatal shooting of 17-year-old Jordan Davis in what is definitely the most prominent Florida stand-your-ground related case since the Trayvon Martin George Zimmerman case, although ultimately stand-your-ground was not the deciding factor in that case. Dunn and his lawyer are invoking the language of the stand your ground law to show that he shot the seemingly unarmed teen in self-defense. And at the same time that this is happening, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that story in a second, a state Senate panel is looking at expanding the Florida stand your ground statutes even further. To remind you about the Michael Dunn case, 4 black guys in high school were sitting in a Dodge Durango. They were at a convenience store in a mid-upper income neighborhood. One guy goes inside to get some gum. And let me be clear, some chewing gum, not a gun. I want to be absolutely clear that nobody's going to confuse what I'm saying. Dunn pulls up next to them, and he was so close that the doors were almost impossible to open because Michael Dunn had pulled up so close. When he got out of the car, there was loud music coming from the Dodge Durango. Dunn told them to turn it down, and they did. Then they turned it back up. Dunn got into an argument with them, pulled out his gun, and fired 10 shots into the Dodge Durango, killing 1 person. The kids in the Durango said that they had no guns. Ultimately, absolutely no guns were found. Dunn immediately fled the scene. He was found the next day 100 miles away, and he's saying that it was stand your ground, that he was in fear for his life because of the altercation he caused as a result of his problem with the loud music. Now, the NRA is lobbying hard in Florida to expand stand your ground even further. Florida stand your ground law grants immunity from both criminal and civil charges to those who use deadly force when they have a legal right to do that without retreating, is I think the clearest way to say it. In other words, if you use deadly force when you're standing somewhere you're allowed to be without retreating, you are justified in using deadly force, and therefore you are immune from civil and criminal prosecution. And now there's a new bill. It's been dubbed the Warning Shot Bill and a Threatened Force Bill. It would extend stand your ground like immunity from both criminal and civil charges to those who point a gun at an attacker or fire the gun as a warning shot. That's just what we need in Florida, Lewis. Even a more relaxed stand your ground statute.
Well, the warning shot part of it, I can understand. We did see a woman jailed for firing a warning shot at her, it was either boyfriend or husband, who she felt threatened by, with no intent to actually shoot anyone. We saw her get jailed for that. So,
but I think that's where actually some people are saying what you're saying, and you may be right, but I think it's further confusing the issue because was she standing her ground? In other words, this entire mentality of stand your ground is not a necessary component to the law. The fact that she didn't intend to hit him with the bullet is one of these things where, yes, it completely mangled that case ultimately, and because of the jury instructions, it became a mess. I just don't think that making the law even more relaxed is the way to solve that particular case.
Probably not, but we will see. Here we have a case where the law is coming up again, and the outcome will determine whether or not the law works, right? Because if this man is found guilty, then I guess maybe we don't have to worry. Maybe this evens out. with the Trayvon Martin case.
Yeah, although I certainly don't think anybody who was a victim of in Trayvon Martin's family would think that there's anything even about it, which, of course, and not that that's what that you were suggesting, but from a legal point of view, maybe they would get one right. But I think if you don't get both right, then it's just simply not even. There's this new Netflix documentary called Mitt, and it's a behind-the-scenes look at Mitt Romney's 2008 and 2012 campaigns for president. It is very entertaining. It has a ton of behind-the-scenes stuff. It's almost like reality show-like. And it's clear from the movie that Mitt Romney loves his family, is a good father, is a good grandfather to his children and grandchildren. We learn that he's a bit of a neat freak, that he's often focused on little bits of trash in his hotel room or ironing his shirt before a big debate. But the documentaries about candidates after they've lost always make you start feeling a little sorry and wondering, would he have really been bad? Maybe I should have voted for him. He seems so personable, etc., etc. It's designed that way. The film is said to be totally nonpartisan in the sense that it doesn't touch politics and policy, and that's true. But that should remind us that it tells us nothing at all about who would have been the better elected official. I even started falling for it myself, Lewis. Maybe you did, because when you see the family moments, aside from the excessive focus on prayer constantly that is depicted there, but other than that, it seems like, this is a really nice guy, just a good guy, and it's divorced completely from the horrible realities of the policies Mitt Romney was campaigning on.
All right. His policies would be ridiculous, and I never thought that the guy was an evil, horrible person. And this documentary came out a little late. I know it took footage from everything that happened and compiled it, but
well, it includes footage from after the 2012 election, so it would have been hard to release it as something pre-election.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. It's I guess it's worth a watch, but
no, I think people should definitely watch it. I think it is interesting, and it's just very interesting to see the debate prep and the conversations that happen behind the scene. And sometimes we don't know, with so many advisors, how involved is the candidate themselves in the day-to-day decisions. And it's interesting to see all that stuff. But go into it knowing that it was meant to give you a very favorable view of Mitt Romney, and it tells you nothing about how his policies would have affected you. Would the fact that he's a neat freak or he's friendly to people in fast food restaurants, does that really tell us whether he cares about 47% or 53% or 100% of Americans? It really doesn't. It doesn't tell us that at all. But I highly recommend watching it. I was very, very entertained by it. Let's play some voicemails. Our voicemail line is 219-2-DAVID-P. I think you're going to like this voicemail.
Hi, David. I was watching one of your older videos. It was about voter registration ID, and you made a point how it's inherently racist because people who do not have IDs and who vote are most likely those of people of color and who vote Democrat. So I would just like to ask you, is it racist when somebody asks you for your ID when you want to purchase tobacco or alcohol or a firearm or to buy a car, or to register a car, or to rent a car, or to drive a car, or if they want to see an ID, I don't know, when you want to buy a house, or if you want to have a permit to hold a rally, or to open a bank account, or to board a plane.
And it goes on and on. Listen, there are two issues here. This, I understand what the caller is doing. It is an example of total sophistry. There is absolutely no comparison between being denied the right to vote, which is a right, versus having to provide ID to buy alcohol. It is not a right. It is not one of the fundamental rights of this country. Or to drive a car. You don't have any constitutional right to drive a vehicle. You don't have any constitutional right to own a house, that everybody needs to have a house. The comparison is absolutely absurd. And I would almost be shocked that someone is making it if it weren't for the fact that I've been hosting this show for years and I'm completely used to people making these types of claims.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It is different when we're talking about a right, and also when we talk about the actual number of voting fraud instances. it's so low that it's clear that the whole point of that is just to make sure that Democrats aren't voting.
Almost completely non-existent when it comes to voter fraud. Okay, that's it for today. We have a great bonus show planned today. How to order and build your own car, a new lawsuit against Tokyo Electric. We'll talk about the newest creative meth bust. Lewis, the voice of reason Motomedy, hosts the bonus show. davidpakman.com/membership. If you sign up now, you could be listening to today's bonus show in 5 minutes, or even watching it if that's your preference.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.